I see it with myself, Oguntola. As you know, I talk about artificial intelligence. The reason I do that is because, well, I'm a geek for artificial intelligence. My doctorate is looking at the impact of artificial intelligence on filmmaking, education, and filmmaking production. I'm very, very interested in it. And the other reason I took it, I decided to do my podcast on artificial intelligence, is because I looked out at this space and I didn't see people that look like me, black, female, African, talking about AI. Every time you see AI being discussed, generally you see white male, or there might be like a splattering of white women, but I don't see people like me. And I just thought, why aren't there black women like myself talking about AI? And I thought, well, you know what? Instead of complaining about it, why don't you step in the waters, my dear? And so here I am talking about artificial intelligence, so that someone else who is interested in artificial intelligence, when they take a look at the landscape, they might see me and feel comfortable in this space and say, oh yeah, look, there's someone else that looks like me talking about artificial intelligence, so I can talk about it too, or I can be interested in it, or I can learn about it, or something. But I think representation is important across all spheres, because we want to send the message that we belong everywhere, in all spaces. There's no space that is excluded to us. All right, so today's episode, I am looking at a review I did of an article written by Alexander Manu. You can read the full review that I did on my blog, nanaooguntola.me. Go to my blog and you'll see the full review. But today I'm just going to give you the highlights of that article, which I found extremely interesting. I really did enjoy reading this. It was, for me, like a confirmation of what I believe artificial intelligence will do in the sphere of creativity and creative output and creative consumption. It was really interesting because I think a week or two before, I was asking some of the questions that he addresses, and I was literally almost on the dollar, or of saying what he said. Like, I was literally saying the same thing, and then I read about it, and I read it. And that's the thing about knowledge and learning and reading and education, and why I'm such a passionate and avid learner and academic, because I find that you know stuff, you understand stuff. And I always tell this to my students as well. You see things and you experience things and you know things, but when you read, or when you come across someone else who's thought about it, they provide language to your thoughts or to your knowledge. They provide that structure that helps you to interpret what it is that you were thinking about. And that is what I found in this article by Alexander Manu. It was like he'd read my thoughts and wrote it. Wrote it better than I was thinking it. It's just that he'd written it before I thought it, if you know what I mean. So he just kind of gave me language for what I was thinking. And so I really like this article, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So for Alexander Manu, he sees AI as a partner, as a collaborator. He sees it as an extension of human creativity, right? Which is, like I said, is how I see it's how I see AI. It's an extension of us, and seeing someone else write it, I think for me was really, affirming. Okay, so he discusses a shift of human design and creation from creators, right? There's a shift to narrators, right? Which is interesting, which is an interesting way to look at the trajectory of AI in creative practice, and how people become narrators of creative output rather than the physical process of actually creating. And obviously right now, one of the key things is about learning how to prompt, right? Learning how to create by narration, so he just defines that, and he talks about the essential nodes of creativity as intention. Like, I intend for this to happen, or to look like, or to sound like, right? I intend to create something. And then about articulating that creation, that thought. People say, oh, AI will take our jobs, and yes, it might take some of your jobs, but it's creating new things. It's creating new ways of accessing our creative space, and our creative space inside of us. Is creating new ways of accessing our own creativity, of expressing our creativity. So it's like, instead of being creators of the art, you're thinkers of the art, you're thinkers of the art, you have an intention, and then you articulate that intention, and being able to use the words that will create the manifestation of what you want to see, right? So he says there is the intention, the articulation, and then the manifestation. So being able to articulate what it is that your intention is, that your imagination is, and then seeing that manifest. I just think that that is just so cool. That is just so cool. And he said that is where creativity is going, right? And we can see that is where it is, to be fair. And then he talks about how AI impacts each of these, right? The intention, what it is that I want to create, and then how I articulate it and how I manifest it. Each of them is completely different from the way that we have traditionally created and produced creative output, right? In traditional creative output, we think about it, we have an intention, this is what I want to do, and then we create it. We go to create that art, we go to create that intention. But with AI, you have an intention for it, and then you articulate it, you narrate it, you define it, you bring it out of yourself, and then you can see the manifestation. So different ways of producing art, right? But still creative, still the human being in charge of what is produced, in terms of providing that direction to AI to say, this is what I'd like you to do. So really interesting. And then he's saying that AI is changing the way we create art, obviously, like I have just said, and we become the instigators of its creation, and we stand aside as spectators. So we are the instigators, but we stand aside and we watch it. We are spectators as it creates this art, as it manifests the art that we have articulated to it. So instead of us, like I said, we think it, instead of us creating it, we articulate it, and then we watch the manifestation. We become spectators as AI manifests what it is that we're thinking, or what it is that we've told it to do. And Manu sees this, so instead of seeing this as a threat, as though, oh, AI is going to take my job, Manu actually sees this as a privilege and a responsibility. He says that it's a new way of being and creating that allows us to go beyond our normal limits of our imagination and to explore new ideas and possibilities of creativity. And I really, really like that, because what he's saying is that artificial intelligence allows us to go beyond what you can do. It allows you to explore the deepest, furthest parts of your imagination, right? And then see it manifested in front of you. But it's your creation, because you thought it. You had the intention. You imagined this world, and then you're able to bring it to pass. You're able to watch it come to pass in front of you. And he's saying that it is a responsibility and it is a privilege for us to be able to do this, to be able to access and output, our deepest imagination, wildest dreams, right there in front of us, right? So, and first of all, he calls this creativity in the digital age, but I'm just going to go back to that. I was talking to someone recently in the United States, and he was talking about how they are creating academies or learning projects where they're teaching people how to prompt, right? How to tell AI, Gen AI, how to create the teaching prompting skills to people. And he was talking about how this allows for democratization of creative output and provides access to a lot more people to create than we've seen before. And that is so true. That is so true for me as an African storyteller, and also as an independent producer, because some of the things that were really difficult, for example, animation is so expensive to do, takes so long to do. So a lot of these things are now accessible to us, right? We can imagine it, and then we can articulate it, and we can watch it manifest in front of us. So AI tools, I think one of the key areas of AI, which he doesn't talk about, but which I just remembered, is just the way it's allowing for the democratization of creative output, right? And for access by people who would not necessarily have had the money to make big budget animation film or a big budget movie, right? So that's really good. One of the things that Manu said, which I thought was interesting because it's counter to the current narrative around bias and AI. Now he feels that AI actually reduces bias, because what he's saying is that as a human being, when we write or we draw or we paint or whatever, we are painting from or creating from our biases, our limitations, who we are, what defines us. But he's saying that when AI creates, when you tell AI to do something, it has no bias, it has no history, it has no past that's connected to some of the things that we are connected to, and therefore AI actually has less bias in its output. AI will deliver what you want it to deliver, and that for me, that's interesting, and I think that that's true, because people talk about bias all the time around AI, and for me, I always feel like there's too much of the idea of bias around AI. How is AI biased? AI is only producing what has been inputted into it, right? AI came into the world that is already biased, unequal, etc. And so therefore it will only produce what it's been taught, what has gone into it. And then the other thing is that AI only outputs what is asked of it, right? So it's not biased. If I ask to see a black African queen, that is what AI will give to me. If I want to see a white or a black disabled athlete, that's what AI will give to me. If I want to see a Caucasian male man running, that's what AI will give to me. AI simply outputs and responds to us, to our biases, to our prompts. So for me, and I really do agree with him here when he's saying AI doesn't care what the bias is. It isn't coming from a place, an emotional place, a subjective place. It's simply outputting what you ask it to do. And that is something I've been saying, that, bias isn't an AI issue. It's not an AI issue. It's the people that made AI are of a specific demographic, and therefore they've put in what relates to them. Right? If a different demographic is inputting the data, they will put in what relates to them. And secondly, who's using the tools? Who's using the AI? Right? What you demand of it is what you will get. Now, the thing that's interesting about Manu's discussions is when he starts to talk about the blurring of the lines between what is artificial intelligence and what is human intelligence produced, right? Creative art, whether it's AI art or people art or human art, right? And he's saying that there is a interconnectedness and a continuum between the two that does not necessarily mean like a division, right? Because obviously we can say AI's tools and AI's creativity comes from human beings anyway. So he's saying that there has to be like a blurring of the lines, which is another interesting idea. So by there being a blurring of the lines, by there being seeing AI as an extension, as a continuum, we see it less as a competitor and more as a collaborator, right? An extension of us. In my review, I say that I love when he says that AI is more than just a tool in a toolbox, but it transcends our imagination, extends and bears testimony to the heights of our imagination and our thinking. And this allows us to be transcendental. The thing about it is AI, what he's saying is it allows us to go beyond the limitations that we put ourselves in, that we cannot produce outside of. Like, we are limited. We're limited by money. We're limited by the space we have. We're limited by the colors we have, by the paints we have, by the canvas we have, by the grammar, right? We're limited in our output, but with AI, it allows us to go beyond all that, because it doesn't need all of that to create, So it allows us to go beyond and to push the boundaries of imagination. And I really, really like that. And he says that we push the boundaries of what we call creativity and go beyond the norm, and we're fearlessly exploring. And he calls it the enduring act of creativity. the enduring act of creativity. And I really, really love that. And in my review, I say that. I said, this is what I think. This is, but I just needed someone else to say it. And I can tell you, I don't know if you can tell from the way I'm speaking, my excitement at this book, at at this article, you know, at Manu's thoughts, because they reinforce what I'm thinking. They reinforce it. But, you know, sometimes you just need someone to kind of validate what you're thinking, so that you're not alone in this sea of AI bias, AI is bad, AI is this, AI that. You want to hear someone else say it. AI is going to take our jobs, etc., etc. So really interesting. And he says that AI also can create new things, which it does. It doesn't have to exist, right? It can just create whatever it is you ask it of it. And I like it because he says that AI will become our playmates and not our masters, which is, like, people just say that, like, AI is going to take over our lives, and AI is going to take all our jobs, and AI is going to take our creativity away. And he's saying this is not the case. He's saying AI is really an extension of you. It's going to be a playmate. It's going to be something that allows you to collaborate, to explore your own creativity, but it will not be your master. Manu does talk about the fact that creating with AI, creating without AI requires rules. So they do. We know that there's a structure, there's a way to write, there's a way to film, there's a way, and he's saying that AI doesn't need, these rules don't apply, which is true to some extent. Okay, it is true, because you can certainly say to AI, do this, and it does that. But I can't remember the name of the author. If I remember, I will just put it on here later on. But he talks about how using AI tools does not negate the need for a university degree. Say you're an artist, does not negate the need for you to go to university and get a university degree. Why? Because you learn the rules, you learn the structure, you learn the guidelines, you learn the language, you know how light's supposed to fall in a certain way in a certain place, right? You know what the focus is supposed to look like, etc. You learn all these things, and by learning these things, you bring it to your use or to your prompting of AI. And therefore, the language that you start to use is much better than someone who hasn't learned these things. You're able to create better. You're able to create at a deeper level of understanding and of knowledge than someone who doesn't have that qualification. So although Manu says, yes, you don't need the guidelines. Yes, we don't. It definitely breaks a lot of the guidelines. But I do think that there's a balance there. I do think that to be really good at prompting, I think you need to know what the rules are. You need to know the rules around lighting. You need to know the rules around focus. You need to, if you're doing a writing piece, you need to know about conflict and structure. You need to know those rules in order to be able to effectively use artificial intelligence to support what you're doing, for sure. So even though I agree with most of what Manu is saying here, I think that there's a caveat to saying that there are no rules when you come to use AI. I think that it's important to have rules. Now, the other thing that's really interesting to me that Manu asks is, how will AI-inspired art impact on how we see art and how we respond? Now, my doctorate is looking at the impact of artificial intelligence on filmmaking education and in filmmaking production. How do we respond? How do we react, as in us as people who are used to seeing art in a certain way? How do we respond to it, right? Our emotions, our feelings, our way of seeing, does it change? And like I said, just a couple of weeks before that, I put that in a LinkedIn post. Will artificial intelligence change the way we see? Will we see differently as we get, especially as we start to get used to images created by artificial intelligence? Will the way we see start to shift? And he talks about it here, which is just amazing. And he's saying, will artificial intelligence inspired art impact on how we see art and how we respond? Will our way of seeing change? And then he suggests that the fusion of tech and design will open a new way of perception and sensory experience. He's saying that when we use AI in design, in creative output, it will ultimately change our way of perception and our sensory experiences and the way we respond, right? That is what he's saying. He's saying that AI will change how we see things. It might be slow now because we are in that space of this negotiation between human art and AI art, and we have both, and we're dealing with both. But there will definitely, I see a shift. I think there will be a shift in how we see art. So he goes on to say it will definitely change the way we perceive, the way we see, and that would in return impact on how we see the physical outside of the virtual. How we see the world will change based on how we see art produced by AI. Very interesting, very interesting. Now, he does try to say that actually AI and human creativity are one and the same thing, which I think falls down a little bit, because he's saying that human creativity is kind of like created. It's not natural like the environment, like it's something, it's an output, and therefore it's artificial, just like artificial intelligence. I think that falls flat on its face, because because creativity is part of us. We are that. It is a natural phenomenon. It is not a creative phenomenon like AI. So I think that does not work for me. I think that there were holes in that argument completely. I say, for example, human creativity is innate to man, so it can be defined as natural. Additionally, if one believes in God, which I do, nature is created. Does it become artificial as well? Because he's insisting that nature is actually natural. That's not created, but it is. I'm a Christian, and I know the world has been created. So we can't. If he's not calling that artificial, then we are not artificial, and our creativity is not artificial either. It is innate to us, right? So I found that this attempt to define human creativity as artificial and thus in the same bracket as AI does not work. It falls, in my opinion. So that's kind of one of the bits where I thought that no. But in general, I thought that this was an interesting book, dealing with and providing answers to so many of the questions around creativity and AI in a time and landscape that is changing like quicksand for so many. And that's the thing about knowledge and books and you know, when people write, instead of, sometimes I think the noise is always louder than the truth. I think that the general hoorah about AI has been negative, like it's biased, it's going to take our jobs, it's horrible, it's a robot, and people haven't taken the step back to actually explore, what does this mean? What does it actually do? How does it really impact on our lives? And I think that he takes that step to do that, and it's so important that we read articles like this so that we are informed, so that we're dealing with AI with knowledge and understanding rather than emotion and fear and trepidation, right? Having said that, I do think that there are questions which I think continue to require consideration. And I say that since creation starts with intention, which of course relates to all of creation, but AI does not have intention, which responds to prompts. The questions we need to grapple with is what happens then when AI develops the capacity to have intention, which I think is really far way off anyway. But I say we need to start discussion on what constitutes art, human art, AI art, because once AI starts to imagine and create art on its own direction, where does that leave human participation in the creation of artistic expressions? So that obviously is the thing that leads to. In my conclusion, I say that since AI will change the way we see art and our perception of reality, where are the guidelines around AI generated art? Who moderates this? How can it be moderated? Do humans want to change the way we see art, our perception of reality? Questions I think we will see, that we need to seek answers to. And this is where further research is required, and not just further research, where guidelines, which do not exist at the moment, especially in relation to AI and creativity. The landscape is chaotic, it's unregulated, it's rudderless. If you see one of my my podcasts, you'll see I say that. But what happens now? Who's policing this? Who's policing the change that's coming through? What are the guidelines? How do people feel safe? And I think that this is what's missing at the minute. I think that's one of the reasons why people are just so trepidatious. So it'd be good to have this discussion and further research as to what all this change is going to mean for our society, so that people understand it, and so that governments themselves can create policies that are relevant to the sector, for the sector, you know, for the sector in terms of the creative sector and artificial intelligence. So that's that. If you want to read the full review, it's on my blog, nanaooguntola.me. But I hope that this discussion raises questions for you, and also provides some answers as to how AI and creativity can coexist, and also obviously raise some questions as to what's next after this. If we're changing the way we see art, if art is changing the way we see reality, what does that mean? What does that mean for us? And how do we continue to harness and use AI to explore the furthest reaches of our imagination without feeling like we shouldn't, like we're doing something bad, or somebody's going to take over our planet or something like that. But let me know what you think in the chat. Let me know what your ideas are around AI being an extension of us, and how it's going to change the way we see art, what we define as art. And one of the things I do say as well, which I forgot to mention, is that I think that there might need to be some kind of demarcation. This is human art and this is AI art. That needs to be defined, rather than trying to pass off maybe AI art as human art, right? So that it's clear there's that demarcation. Because I think about my daughter, and she's an artist, and she would take days to do a picture, and she gets upset. She says, AI just does it in a few minutes, and I take days to do it, and it's unfair. So I think that there need to be systems, right, and regulations and rules in place that clearly define and draw a line and demarcate what is human art and what is artificial intelligence art, so that even though we are coming into a space of seeing things differently, of appreciating art differently, we're still able to continue to appreciate art created by human beings. Art that is thought about and created, rather than art that's thought about and articulated, right? There has to be a space for both, and the guidelines need to be clear about what those are, and how we can make sure that they coexist without creatives feeling like AI is coming to take away from them, right? But how we enhance it, how we enhance this creative space as we continue to move forward, and as we continue to change in the way we consume art, and in the way we create art, and in the way we see it. Well, that's it for now, and that's the way I see it for today. And I hope, like I said earlier, that I'm leaving you with some questions, and hopefully I have provided some answers as well. And you can read the full article on my blog, and I will see you next time on The Way I See It. You take care.